Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the ScruffyMovies podcast. I'm Zach Wallace.
And I'm John Crocker.
And as we mentioned last week, if you happen to listen to that episode, this was an episode that I don't know why, honestly, we haven't done it sooner. Because knowing myself and knowing Crocker and how much we love this series of movies, it's very strange that it hasn't just come up in casual conversation before. But as we were talking about, we were kind of planning out a couple weeks ahead some episodes we could do, and I was like, why don't we do a Back to the Future one? And Crocker was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, it blows my mind that I understand that it'll take us a while probably to get through all of the franchises and movies that are almost necessary for a movie podcast, but it blows my mind that it hasn't at least come up in reference or conversation, because I don't believe it has, maybe more than once or twice.
Yeah, the only thing that led me to know that you were a Back to the Future fan was you showing up to our company's Halloween party dressed as Marty McFly.
Yeah, and I called him like Morty McFlone because every piece was just a little not right.
Yeah.
Like, the vest was the wrong color red, the jean jacket was the wrong color jacket, the shirt wasn't exactly the right pattern, my Nikes weren't exactly Nikes, but it passed. From about 20 feet, it passed.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know, and that can kind of get us into the conversation, but the iconography of Back to the Future is so recognizable that as soon as you walked in, even though you were kind of being Morty McFlone, I was like, oh, cool, Crocker's dressed as Marty. Like, I just recognized, like, the plaid shirt, jean jacket, vest, and I was like, oh, that's Marty McFly.
Yeah, so many layers. You don't realize how many layers he wears until you have to put them all on.
I know, and I always thought that when I was watching the movie, when he walked in wearing the vest, because you and I were of an age where vests were still, like, kind of cool, and so I had a vest I would wear, like, to elementary school and stuff, and then I remember them, like, making fun of him in the 50s, like, why are you wearing a life preserver?
Yeah, how long have you been in port?
Yeah, they think he's a Navy SEAL or something.
I think there's one scene where he just like goes along with it. Somebody asks him what he's doing, and he's mentioned something like, "Oh, just in port for a few days." Like, yeah. He just knows it'll pass after the third person.
Yeah, and they're like, "Oh, all right, whatever."
So, just to get everything out on the table here, I know you probably are aware of this, Zach, but for the listeners, I have to admit I've seen the first one and the second one quite a few times. And I have watched the third one, but I remember long ago just thinking to myself, I should probably never watch that again. So as far as chatting through all of this goes, I might be a little lacking in knowledge on the third one. I know the basics of what happens. I remember the basics of the plot. I remember the school teacher and the clock and everything else in the train, obviously. But as far as the details, they'll be a little fuzzy because to me, I don't know. That one just went off the deep end.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of, when you look objectively at the trilogy of movies, it's almost as if they were planning for a fourth one, I feel like, where they would time travel some more. Because the first one makes sense on its own because it's the original. He goes back in time. Got it. The second one makes sense because, like, logistically speaking, it makes sense for one to go to the past, and they're like, okay, next one goes to the future. And then so when they were sitting down for a third one, they were like, well, we've gone back and we've gone to the future. Where can we go now? And somebody's like, the Wild West. And they were like, well, I guess. It feels kind of like not fully connected to the other two.
Yeah. And, this is a question I guess you might know the answer to. And I don't know if there really is even an answer to it. But in the first one, when it ends going into the second one.
Yes, going into the future.
Right. And they did a really good job at really just like picking up where that one left off, using a lot of the stuff from the first movie and the second movie. I mean, it literally starts where the other one ends. And then at the end of the second one, at least on the version that I've always seen, there's like to be continued, and then it goes into what is basically a trailer for the third one.
Yeah, that was, I believe, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember it. I used to know this because I remember reading like the trivia for it. I believe that was specifically for home video. The theatrical didn't end like that. I think that they had announced a third one, but I don't think it ended like with the to be continued. I think for home video release, they put that in because they were trying to promote the third movie, which was like just coming out around the same time as part 2 was hitting VHS.
Gotcha. Because they did mention all throughout the second one in little kind of tidbits like, oh, I've always wanted to go to the Wild West. And then they mentioned like Biff's great great grandfather that was a gunslinger.
Mm-hmm.
So they are sort of planting those seeds. And I definitely feel like this, trilogy may have been more planned from the beginning than one would think. And you might not want to think that because it sort of just goes off the rails the longer it goes. But I think they at least knew what was coming next.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that this movie does so well, like connecting everything together, that when I was a kid, I didn't know, like, I didn't know that, I didn't know how movies were made, like how Hollywood worked. I didn't know that they made the first one. And then because the first one was good, they made the second one, and then they made the third one. I thought that it was like they just made them all. Like they walked into Hollywood and they were like, we're making 3. And Hollywood was like, done deal. And so I literally would watch the first movie again, and like the scenes where I know where Marty is, but in the second movie back in 1955 again, I would legitimately try and like stare down the screen and like see like peaks of his head or something. And I'm like, I know he pops up here. And then in the first movie, they would like cut away from where it shows him popping up. And I was like, oh, dang it, I could have seen him. Like I legitimately thought they had it planned to like that amount of detail, that they would actually have a Michael J. Fox stand-in walking around in scenes in the background because they knew that they were going to make the second one and he was going to be there at this time.
Yeah, in fact, it would not surprise me to learn, or it would surprise me that if they don't already have a version where they have worked that in like they did with Star Wars and so many other movies, going back after they remastered them for DVD or whatever it is, go through and actually put those little tidbits in that wouldn't at all mess up the first movie, but would totally be there to serve the folks that were looking back.
Yeah. And that, well, they've had like special editions come out, but their special editions were just like, yeah, with more special features, and now it's on Blu-ray. I don't know if they've actually like edited anything into the movie.
Yeah. I hope they would not. I guess that's my actual feeling on the matter. Like I think that, and we've talked about this before, that once a movie's done, it should be done, and you shouldn't go fiddle with it without making it like very well known that it's a fiddled with copy. But at the same time, I know that I'm kind of a purist, so it blows my mind that they haven't done that. If they haven't, I think one of my favorite stories, and what I always think about when we talk about this, is when they went back to remaster the Titanic, and because Neil deGrasse Tyson had complained that they had the wrong sky in the background in the theatrical version, because he actually looked back at like where it was on the earth at that time of the year, and that time, that year and that time of the year, he told them they had the wrong sky. So when they remastered it, they actually redid the sky above all of the scenes so it was accurate. And I always think, like, that's such a fiddly, tiny little thing that literally no one noticed at all, except for one person, and they changed it. So I always expect them to go back and play with things and mess with our mind a little bit.
Yeah, that's maybe like the Back to the Future producers were sitting down to do it, and then they had just released like the really fiddled with versions of Star Wars, and they saw the reaction to that, and they're like, oh, no, never mind. Just put it out on Blu-ray again.
Yep, scrap it. It blows my mind how old these movies are now too. Because when you go back and you watch them, like they don't feel like they're as old as they actually are. Like these are some really well put together 1980s movies, and especially in the second one, where like you mentioned, where there's scenes that have both versions of Marty in the scene. Like that was, I mean, I would imagine it's still relatively new technology back then to be able to like lay over, film and all of that, and they did a great job at it. Whereas when you go back and watch some of those movies from the 80s and they try to pull something like that off, it's just horribly obvious that something on screen doesn't belong.
Oh yeah, there's in the Blu-ray copy, which I never noticed it until I bought it on Blu-ray, of Christmas Vacation. There's at the very end scene where Santa's flying away, you can see the box that the animator put around that picture to like clip that picture, and then you see the box with the Santa sleigh in it like moving through the sky. And I remember watching that for the first time on Blu-ray. I think I was like a freshman in college when I bought it, and I was like, oh no. Oh no.
Yeah, because with all the white noise and just blur that came inherently in the past, you would never be able to make it out.
Yeah, but now that it's like crystal clear Blu-ray, you can just clearly see a box where the animator just moved the picture of the sleigh.
Yeah. Yeah, but talking about just how well they were put together and the look of them, like you were talking about earlier, is so just drilled into the culture now. I feel like if you had to point to one sort of scene of what the 80s was, I would say there's quite a few in Back to the Future that really might have been like 80s exaggerated, but that's totally the way that we recollect, thinking back to the 80s. Even though this was an 80s film set in the 80s, being made in the 80s, it still feels like an exaggerated version of the 80s. And then the best part is when they look ahead to the future and it's like they've just compounded that times 10. Like, this is what someone from the 80s would think 2015 looks like, with flying cars, and everything is just retro enough with the sharp corners and, wings on everything and bright colors and like crazy glasses where you could take phone calls and watch TV, which we actually kind of have now, which is scary that totally came true. Like, it just, the whole look and feel, I'm not sure what you refer to that as in the movie world, but just that whole look and feel of what they tried to do was really awesome, especially when they set that beside such a, like, I don't want to say dull, but like real life 1950s,
Yeah, that's I always really like that more like idealized version of the 50s. And we've talked about this before, how movies like that and like Leave It to Beaver and all that kind of stuff is like, oh yeah, man, the 50s, yeah. But if you really look back at like American history, not a great time to live. But like the idolized version of what these movies put out is like, oh wow, oh yeah. But I mean, just talking about the iconography and like the 80s of it, I honestly can't think of something more 80s than like the scene at Twin Pines Mall, because number one, takes place at a giant, like brand new mall in the middle of the night. Number two, an old man and a high school child are hanging out together, and they never really talk about how Marty and Doc met. They're never like, oh, he was his science professor in middle school and they really just got along. He's just friends with Doc and nobody really questions it. I feel like that's a very 80s concept as well. He skateboards down there wearing his 80s clothes, listening to his cassette tape, and then they are attacked by Libyan terrorists in the middle of the night in a mall parking lot, and he drives a DeLorean-made time machine back to the 50s. I feel like that entire scene couldn't be made in any other decade than what it was.
In the J.C. Penney's parking lot.
Yeah.
And looking back, it's weird to see things in movies like that back then that I just feel like would never happen now. And the random, like, I want to talk about the never seen motives of Doc real quick, because he does get in deep with some Libyan terrorists that are coming after him. He steals the plutonium. Everybody thinks that he's a bad guy. Like, all the teachers and everybody are like, oh, you're going to get in trouble if you hang out, with that Doc fella. And when the Libyans show up, Doc's like already packing heat. Like, he had a revolver and like tucked in his pants this whole time, and like just pulled it out, blasted, ready to go. And I definitely remember the crazy gun from the third one too. I don't remember much about it, but I think Doc has done more in his past than we're led to believe.
Yeah, it might be interesting, honestly, to see about Doc's past and stuff like that. And I just want to know, like, and I think that they've probably released it at some point, how they became friends, but they're like best friends. Like Doc could have called anybody. He could have called another scientist, but he's like, no, Marty, I'll call this high school child to the mall at 2 a.m. to come videotape me, which in today's standards would have Doc Brown arrested.
Oh, totally. Totally, totally. You know, I wonder in some weird way if their relationship was like the genesis for Rick and Morty.
Oh, it 100% was. That the original cartoon was, that's why their names are so similar, Rick and Morty, Doc and Marty.
Right. So they have come out and like addressed that and said, spot on, that's sort of where we were inspired from.
Yeah, the original cartoon started out as just like a straight up parody of uh Back to the Future. Because
Yeah.
I mean, and you can kind of tell when you look at it, Rick kind of looks like Doc, and Morty's just this confused high school kid who messes around with like the space-time continuum and stuff because his grandpa's just crazy like that. Yeah, it's 100% inspired by Back to the Future.
Word. I've always wondered that. I mean, I've seen a lot of the Rick and Morty episodes, but never like got deep enough into it, or probably looked back to the very beginning. But I always wondered that. But you're totally right. But that goes for a lot of '80s movies. Like there are some really, really like questionable, raunchy '80s movies that came out. I mean, totally not in the same vein as Back to the Future, but just in general, there was a lot of things made probably from like 82 to like 92 or so that just would never, ever, ever, ever pass inspection nowadays.
Oh yeah, I rewatched Revenge of the Nerds maybe like a year or so ago, and I was like, whoa, a lot of standards in this one were very 80s standards, not held to the standards of today's cinema. And also, if you just watch movies from like the 80s and 90s, it's just like passing jokes. They'll like call people gay and stuff like that. You know, it's just weird seeing that kind of stuff where if you think, like you said, about just kind of the environment we live in now, it would get one shot in and they'd be like, nope, we're not going to, I don't know why we gave you the money to make this in the first place. And it would just be shelved for years.
Yeah, just go back and watch Bill Murray and Meatballs.
Oh yeah. All those like Meatballs and all that kind of stuff. American Pie even, which came out in 1997, I don't think could be made with the same standards that Hollywood holds today. It would not be the same movie.
No, it wouldn't.
Not even close.
Yeah, and if they were to make something like that, it would be ripped and pulled in so many directions from like political motivations and everything else. It would ruin the movie. I can almost assure you. Like that
Yeah.
was the thing about these movies, is I believe, and there were, don't get me wrong, since the beginning of theater, there have been movies that have had agendas and political motives, and a lot of them have done great jobs at portraying that and still being great movies. But I feel like, especially in today's climate, if someone were to come up with American Pie like being the most just like pure vision of what it was, because it was very well executed for what it was, I feel like it would just get destroyed. It wouldn't even be the same movie.
Yeah, and I mean, and even like the women in American Pie aren't like just like standing around being taken advantage of women. I mean, even the end scene, Allison Hannigan takes advantage of Jim and all this stuff. They're not just like, oh, all these men are around here. What am I going to do? I'm just a dumb girl. Like, even in that movie, they're not like that. And I still feel like up to today's standards, it's still a kind of a questionable movie of like, it might pass, but like it would be very barely.
Yeah. And, this is a weirder relationship too in Back to the Future. Like you were talking about, it's like an old crazy man and then like a 17-year-old. And
Yeah.
for some reason, the 17-year-old is like swinging by the old man's crib, like before school. Like this is weird things happening. I mean, I can only think of a few other movies like that. And all the ones I can think of are going to be like Cop and a Half and stuff like that, where it's like a really young kid, which is probably a bit more passable. But
yeah, but even then, even in Cop and a Half, they were literally like, Burt Reynolds, you watch this child because of this. And Back to the Future, They're just cool best friends, and nobody questioned it.
Yeah. And they never really say, like, is Marty like really smart? Is he maybe not so smart? Like, is he hanging out with the professor because, like, or the doc because he wants to be a scientist one day?
Yeah.
Because, Doc shows him like how to work everything, and he seems to pick it up and like understand it and be curious enough, but not so curious that he can't easily break away and go make the rest of the movie happen.
Right. And Marty's and they never, I think because these movies were always more about like the sense of adventure and wonderment and like time travel and stuff. They were never really big like character motivation pieces, like if Marty needed to know this about lightning, guess what? He knew this about lightning, and nobody ever really questions it. And we see that Marty is like late in school a lot because he has problems with the principal and stuff. And he's not the stereotypical smart guy, like he rides a skateboard, he's hanging out with his girlfriend, he's in a rock band. He's just like the regular kid. But they never like, if Marty needs to know this, got it, no problem. Doc taught this to him way back when or whatever, so he probably is really smart, but it's just these movies choose to never focus on that. And I really can't blame them for it, because I feel like if they did, they would be different movies than what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, totally. What would you classify this as? Is it like, is it coming of age because there's a little bit of that? Is it like a buddy comedy because there's a little bit of that? Is it like a character out of time because there's a little bit of that? It's like, it's hard to put this one in a genre.
Yeah, I put it in my own like personal movie collection, because my movie collection is split up by genre and then alphabetized within the genre. And it's in the comedy section because I laugh more at it than anything else. And so it's always seemed like a comedy to me. It's a comedy with sci-fi elements. It's a comedy with coming of age elements. Like they always went for like a joke first. If it had any other genre closing in on it, like almost neck for neck, it would definitely be between comedy or sci-fi.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think it's comedy. I definitely think it falls firmly into sci-fi. But usually within those sort of overarching genres is where I would say, oh, this is sort of like the 3-word plot synopsis, buddy cop kind of thing.
Yeah. And also, I heard you giggle when I was describing my movie collection.
Yeah, just because I know how many movies you have, and it actually makes sense that that's the way you would do it. But that also means that you have many different groups of movies in alphabetical order. So I'm just thinking of like, what happens if you have that one movie that's kind of like this that could be in 4 different sections and you're not real sure which one it's in. You have to go alphabetically through like all these different cases in order to find what you're looking for.
Yeah, there are some where I'll be like, what were you thinking, past Zach? Like I had put Shaun of the Dead in the horror movie section when I was a kid. And so that's just how it stayed, like traveling through different eras of my movie collection. And I went to find it probably like 5 or so years ago. And I was looking in the comedies and I was like, well, it's not here. I know that I have it. And I was like, I didn't put it in the horror section, did I? And I looked, and sure enough, there it was. And I was like, that's not where that goes. And so I just put it up to be resorted later.
Yeah, I'm telling you, man, you need like a giant binder with just printed out like the list of all the movies that you own and where exactly in the collection they are. And that way,
I know, and I could be out and I'm like, and I know whether or not I have a movie. Like I know my entire collection.
Yeah, that blows my mind that a human can hold that much information.
I remember in high school, somebody had asked me a question about a movie, and I was like, oh, yeah, The Mask, Jim Carrey and Cameron Diaz was in it. It's PG-13. It's a really good comedy. It was like this, and I just described it off the top of my head, and somebody was just looking at me like with wide eyes, and I was like, what? And they went, how do you know that? I was like, I don't know. It's just what I know. I don't know. I just remember it.
Jeez. I mean, I could totally do that with albums, like music.
Yeah.
But music is it's a lot less. There's a lot less moving pieces when it comes to who played what on an album, when a band may have like 3 albums in an entire career.
Yeah.
But another thing I think doesn't get enough credit, or maybe it does. Maybe it gets enough credit, but we just don't do it enough in today's movies, is actually that like supporting world and everything that's going on around the character. Like one of my absolute favorite things about this set of movies is just the characters that are in every single one of them. I mean, apparently nobody has moved out of this town like ever.
Yeah, all the family heritage traces back through Hill Valley to the Wild West.
All the way to the future. There's like this one neighborhood, the one town square, the one cafe that's like a diner turned to cafe, turned like futuristic retro cafe. It's like all in the same spot. And
there's always Biff, there's always McFly's, there's always Principal Strickland's.
Yeah, and the mayor is like in the 50s. It's the kid working in the diner, and then you see his son in the 80s, and then in the 2015 it's the third. You know, it's like the same family, and I dig that because again I like the world building, and although there is not a lot of world in this universe as far as like this town and a finite number of characters, they did a fantastic job leveraging and using the crap out of what they had.
Yeah, I think that kind of harkens to I think that we have become so accustomed to that. People back in like the 60s and 70s and even the 80s and stuff were a little bit, I think that Hollywood kind of looked down on people. They didn't think they were stupid, because we do have like some cerebral movies and like really interesting thought-provoking movies coming out at that time, like 2001 A Space Odyssey and A Clockwork Orange and stuff like that. But the majority of movies didn't have like a lot of characters, or they didn't like really take the time to like dive into the motivations and the actions and stuff like that, because they were like, audiences don't care. Just make a movie. They blow stuff up, make them laugh, kick them out. As long as we get their $2, we don't care. And now I think, especially with Netflix and everything, and like the weekend binge of television shows becoming so popular, Hollywood is like, yeah, make them and that can be perfectly exemplified by something that we reference a lot on this show. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is something that never could have happened in the 80s. They would have been like an interconnected movie series that's like 35. I think that Captain Marvel, which just came out, is the 21st movie. So and they're not even slowing down. So if Hollywood was like, oh yeah, the movie series that's 21 interconnected movies where audiences have to see mostly every single one to understand little like in jokes and stuff of other ones, no one's going to go see that. And now it's like the biggest franchise in the world. I think that Hollywood has just realized we're smarter than they gave us credit for. And so we see that more now, like the rise of the background characters and the side characters just progressing through stuff. Whereas back then it was kind of like oh wow, that's pretty cool. Everyone's kind of the same. And it's like little Easter eggs you can pick up on.
Yeah. And I mean, I know we've said it 1,000 times, like we always refer to Marvel, but back then movies were really what you had. Like in the TV shows of the time were all designed so that you could watch any given one on any given afternoon and not need to know what happened in the episodes previous. Yep. You know, they're all like sitcoms and hospital dramas and you know, that type of stuff. And in our generation, maybe starting with movies like these, really, and a lot of the other sort of big epic movies and franchises, slowly they've warmed us up to that. Slowly they've figured out that we actually will watch things in order. And then of course we got technological help when it came to everything from the first like DVRs to where you could actually record things. And if you missed it live, you didn't miss it forever or have to buy it in a year on VHS, you know, and then the popularity of actually owning collections of TV shows, and then followed of course by on demand and Netflix and all the other streaming services that have really made it a possibility. But in 1985, this was really what you were working with.
Right. Like this was it. This was the epitome of like the interconnected movie, because even thinking back to like the manure stuff, I think it was like D's manure company in Back to the Future 1, and then when they go to the future it's like H's manure company, and then when they go back to the Wild West, it's like A's manure company, you know? So it's like just these little inside jokes that you can pick up on with these interconnected movies, but you know, it's never really something that people I don't, not like they didn't talk about, but it's something that people, I don't know if Hollywood knew that people were looking for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. One of my favorite pokes to Hollywood in the second movie was the what's that sound mean?
That sound means it's halftime.
Woo-woo. So anyway, poke to Hollywood is Jaws 19 on the marquee.
Yeah, for sure.
Love that. All right, halftime.
All right, so if you guys haven't listened to a show before, halftime is the part of the podcast where Crocker and I just take a break from the conversation we're having, and we kind of go through some of the new trailers we've seen, some new movies we've seen, some movie news we're excited about, things like that. And actually, we've been giving away digital copies during this time as well. And so this week, we're going to be giving away 2 digital copies, but they relate to each other, and they also relate to the topic we're talking about, and those are going to be the DC animated universe movies of Batman Ninja and Batman Gotham by Gaslight. Now, if you haven't seen these movies, both of them are very, very, very good, and they're basically about a Batman displaced from time. So Batman Gotham by Gaslight takes place in London, England in like the 1800s or something. Batman has to chase down Jack the Ripper, and then Batman Ninja takes place in feudal Japan, and it's animated like an anime. Super cool. So if you want to win both of those, just comment the keyword below Batarang, or send that to me in a direct message at ScruffyMovies on Instagram. Again, the keyword is Batarang. And if you send that to me on Instagram at ScruffyMovies or comment it below, you're entered to win free digital copies of Batman Ninja and Batman Gotham by Gaslight.
I have a question about those.
Yes.
So the animated movies I have not seen many of, but you've given me some. I know there's a lot that exists. How are those rectified in sort of the overall cinematic universe? Are they standalone, their own thing, doesn't cross over at all? Or is it kind of like the Netflix shows are for the MCU, where we kind of count them as just things that are happening parallel to the greater universe?
I would say they're more parallel than anything, but there's not a lot of crossover on stuff. Like Batman Ninja and Batman Gotham by Gaslight specifically are just, they started calling them they're like Elseworlds movies or something like that. So basically alternate universe movies that takes place outside of the main animated universe they've started making with their like in continuity movies.
Gotcha. Okay. So they are at least explained a little bit.
Right. It's basically like, yeah, alternate universe. Batman was around in the 1800s and he had to fight Jack the Ripper. And then Batman Ninja's like, oh yeah, alternate universe. The Joker figured out a time machine, brought everybody from Gotham back to feudal Japan, and now he's taken over and
Yes.
Batman has to fight him.
Totally just alternate timelines all over the place.
Yeah.
Great choices for the quintessential alternate timeline movie. Back to the Future.
Yeah. I was like, man, what am I going to give away for Back to the Future? And then I went, oh yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, should I begin?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I have a few on my list this week that I know we've talked about before, and then a few that we haven't. So first and foremost is actually going to be a TV show, not a movie, and it's going to be on Prime, called Good Omens. Have you seen the trailer for this?
I have heard about it, and I feel like I saw one of those like 10 or 15-second ads before a Facebook video started or something like that, but I haven't actually watched the full trailer, no.
Yeah, from what I can tell, it's very much of like there's an angel and a demon, and it's kind of like a buddy drama dealio, and the apocalypse is nigh, but the Antichrist is not like appearing, and without that, then you can't have good and evil or blah, 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 blah. So anyway, there's an angel and a demon that become buddies and have to work with one another. It's a TV show, and the way they're setting it up, it looks like it could totally be one of those, like they save the world or end the world at the end of the first series, and then that may be all that happens. I'm not entirely sure about that, but it looks good, and I'm definitely going to check it out. Brightburn is the next one. Checked out
Yeah.
that trailer. I believe we've actually mentioned that one on the podcast before.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, by James Gunn, and a lot of other Gunns are credited on that one as well, which I'm assuming are his brothers. And
Probably.
so I actually got like a good look at that trailer. And once again, I feel like we are in a bit of a renaissance of horror movies that look good enough to actually go see in theaters. And that's one of them.
Yeah, that one looks, from the first trailer, I was like, what are they doing? Is this going to be like a Superman parody trailer? And then like kind of when it turned horror, I was like, oh yes. Like it's everything I want.
Oh yeah, if you just cut like the first probably 30 seconds off of that trailer and showed it to someone and said, "Hey, look, they're making a Smallville movie." Like it would totally make sense. Like landed from space in a cornfield in Kansas, discovering superpowers. Like parents are a little concerned, but they're more or less willing to go along with it. Like if you just cut the trailer before it gets crazy and it turns into a horror trailer, that would 100% pass for like a Superman spinoff.
Yeah, it looked like they ripped cinematography basically straight from Man of Steel.
Yep. The next one I have down is the Tolkien movie, which I had mentioned, I believe, 2 weeks ago now, and we actually got a trailer for it, and that does look awesome. It is sort of what we anticipated. It is very Hollywoodized as like an actual movie telling an actual story, with a person and an arc and all kinds of crazy stuff that happens, as opposed to more of just a loose biography. It really looks more like an actual Hollywood movie. Either way, though, I'm excited for it. I'm a huge Tolkien fan, so that should be good. And then the last one, which I hadn't heard anything about until just recently, is called Midsummer. Have you heard of that?
Yes, I have. That's by Ari Aster, who made the incredible horror movie called Hereditary. So I am very looking forward to that.
From what I can tell, there's some type of like festival. It's super creepy. It looks like a flower festival. And this entire trailer to me just like looks like something you hear about them premiering at like a weird, obscure film festival in like Norway somewhere. Like it's all just bright colors. People are wearing white gowns. The whole screen is just like overexposed, washed out with like, white. So it looked very, very unique and really cool. And if you come at me and say that whoever this is has a track record of awesomeness, I trust your judgment there.
Yeah, I think so far the only movie he has made is Hereditary. And I don't know if you've gotten a chance to watch that one yet. And you know how many horror movies I watch. The movie's about 2 hours long, and for the first hour and a half, it's just little tiny things. It's about a family being haunted, basically by demons or ghosts or things of the like. And the first hour and a half is just little like subtle things. Like it's kind of creepy. Like a candle will turn on when nobody's expecting it. Like it's just kind of little subtle stuff. And then the last 30 minutes is some of the most terrifying and like visceral horror I have seen in recent years. When I walked out of the movie room I was watching this in, because my wife refused to watch it with me, because there was a test that they did where they put heart monitors on audiences they showed the movie to, and it said that this movie tracked heart rates at the same rate it would be if somebody was having like a heart attack or something like that. And so she's like, I ain't watching that. And so I watched it by myself. And when I walked out, my hair was pulled up like Tommy Boy, because I had my fingers on my head for the last 30 minutes of the movie out of stress.
Well, that's awesome. First off, I want to know more about this metric system. Is this like a grading thing they do for movies where you can like look up the heart scale on like how spooky a movie is? I want to know this. Is this a standardized thing?
I don't think it's a standardized thing. That I guess they just thought like, man, this is really scary. People are talking about how scary it is. For marketing, let's put heart monitors on people and actually track their heart rates. And so they released like a line graph, and it was basically like first 30 minutes, and then you could see it kind of like gradually rise people's heart rates, and then they get to the last 30 minutes and it shoots up like a mountain.
Man, I want to see, if you can go buy a bottle of hot sauce and look up on the Scoville scale or whatever it is, how hot it is, I think you should be able to go see a movie and look up on the whatever we decide we want to call it scale, how spooky it is.
I would love to see it as like the Crocker scale, and it's just a picture of your face on the back, and it's like, it's all right, or it's like,
it's only 2 Crockers.
It's only 2 Crockers. It's not that bad.
I love it.
The Crocker scale of horror. All right. Well, I actually have a lot on my list for halftime this week. A lot of cool stuff happened this week. First off, something kind of sad, but kind of I also was expecting. They announced the cancellation of Arrow this week. It will be coming back for season 8, but it will be a shortened 10-episode season to basically let them wrap the story up. And Dylan, actually, who was on the podcast before, our coworker where we work at, I was talking to him about it, and he went, oh, man, those 10 episodes are going to get them right to the Crisis on Infinite Earths event that they're setting up for. I wonder if they're going to kill off Arrow in that, because in the comic series, traditionally, Flash and Supergirl both die. And he's like, I wonder if they're going to switch that out for Arrow, and they're going to kill him in the crossover. And then they'll have like 2 episodes of Arrow left for wrap-up, like where everybody else's lives are going. And I was like, oh, well, I wasn't thinking about that, but yeah, I guess that's true. So kind of sad, but also a little bit expected. And also Arrow has been very good this season. So I'm glad if it's ending now. It's kind of going out on a high note and not the whimper that kind of was produced from seasons 3 and 4. Also, Idris Elba, which I'm surprised you didn't mention, has been cast as the new Deadshot. He's taking over Will Smith's role in James Gunn's new Suicide Squad. And I know you're a huge Idris Elba fan and a huge James Gunn fan. And I think this is just like a match made in Crocker heaven for you.
That's true. I've told every person I've come in contact with for the past 4 days that that's happening. So I've exhausted it in my own. I've told you on like 3 different occasions.
Yeah, I remember seeing the news, and then the next day you messaged me, and I believe your exact message was, Heimdall's the new Deadshot?
Yeah, something like that. First off, I can never really remember his name. Like, I can remember enough of it, but I can surely never spell it correctly. So I'll just go with what I know.
Third up on my list is something that we just talked about, Brightburn, which looks incredible. Very excited for that. Next up is they just released the season 2 trailer for Cobra Kai, which is the YouTube, I believe it used to be YouTube Red. I think it's YouTube Premium now, but it's the continuation of the Karate Kid story on YouTube Premium. And Cobra Kai season 1 just absolutely blew me away. It was everything I wanted it to be, and kind of everything I didn't know I wanted it to be. They did a lot of stuff that I wasn't expecting that I was really excited about. And it made me, that was one of those shows where like I couldn't wait to get through work for the day because I just had to go home and keep watching it. Like I just wanted to watch Cobra Kai. And that doesn't happen with me with TV shows very often, where I just want to watch, like until it's over, I want to watch it. That doesn't happen very often. And Cobra Kai season 1 was that for me. So I'm hoping season 2 keeps up the same momentum and it's just as good. Shazam, the new DC movie, came out with a new trailer, and that looks really good. They started getting reviews and stuff for it, and people are saying that it's the one review I saw that's been sticking with me is somebody called it a mix between Big, Harry Potter, and The Goonies, and that's just been sticking with me. But people are losing their minds for it and saying it's amazing and how good and funny and everything it is. So I'm very excited for that one. Something that will get you excited, the new Jordan Peele movie, Us, just started getting reviews coming out, and people are saying Jordan Peele does it again. It's another modern horror movie masterpiece, and it basically confirms what everybody thought when Get Out came out, in that Jordan Peele is one of the greatest horror movie storytellers of our time.
So far, two is great. But in 5 years from now, I would like to see 10.
Yeah, me too. Hopefully. But again,
pick up the pace there, yeah. Mr. Peele.
But yeah, kind of similar to Shazam, people are just kind of losing their minds for it. So I'm looking forward to both of those movies. And
This is when I stop watching trailers for something like Shazam, because I think they've had 3 so far and they've all been great. But I feel like the more you watch now, the more you're just going to spoil for yourself.
yeah, that's kind of the philosophy I've adopted, where like I'll watch the main trailers, but I used to get really into watching like the TV spots and the clips and like all this stuff they release. I really only watch the main trailers for stuff now, and then I'm like, all right, I got it.
Yeah, because
I'll see the rest.
if you get too like in tune with how they do all of that, you can almost see a third of the movie or more before you even watch the movie.
Yeah, for sure. And then, of course, finally, I just got to go see Captain Marvel on Friday, and I haven't even talked to you about it yet. It is amazing. I loved it.
Good, because I've heard it's got pretty mixed reviews.
It's got an 80% approval rating. People are review bombing it right now, like fans and stuff, just because I guess they don't like Brie Larson or something like that. But the movie itself is incredible. It has a great 90s soundtrack, a lot of really cool like 90s references. It's a really cool like mind trip of a story. It takes a lot of twists and turns I didn't see coming, which I also wasn't expecting at all. I didn't think I was going to be seeing like a trippy movie, but you kind of do. But yeah, at the end of it, I was just blown away. It was incredible.
Well, I know for a fact that I believe you, sir, are coming with me when I go watch it.
Yes, we are. On the 22nd, we will be watching it.
Which is a long time from now. So I will do my best to shield myself from the spoilers, although it may honestly already be too late.
Yeah, it's very good though. I'm surprised at some of the hate it's getting. I think honestly that the only reason it's getting hate is because people haven't seen the movie. Because if they've seen it, I think that they would really like it because it is a very good movie. Going into it, I had the kind of, if this helps explain any better how much I like the movie. Going into it, I was like, yeah, Captain Marvel's going to be an Endgame, neat. But I really want it to be like the main 6 Avengers that fight Thanos. They've been there since the beginning. I want them to be the ones to take him down. Captain Marvel can be in it and she can help, but she doesn't need to be the like end all be all. She doesn't need to be the Superman that just shows up at the end and like, let me clean this up for you, and then kills everybody. I wouldn't like that. And then after watching this movie, I'm like, yep, okay, yep, the event, let her just come in and do whatever she needs to do, is how much I like this movie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, we will certainly have an entire episode dedicated to that.
Oh, for sure.
Within, I would say, not very long.
At least like 2 weeks, maybe.
2 weeks. Mark your calendars.
But yes, very, very good. Very excited to be able to break that one down a little bit more with spoilers and everything.
God, there's so many questions I just want to ask.
But that's it for me. That's it for halftime this week. So pretty beefy list, but it was a lot of stuff this week that I was excited about. We've had a couple dry weeks here in the past couple months, so I was excited that I had a lot of news to talk about.
Yeah, that seems to be the trend in the movie industry. It's, very much of a like have to compete with everyone else. So if either your competitor this year drops a trailer, you drop a trailer, and it sort of happens in bursts, I feel like.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I just have to absolutely mention on the podcast, because it is getting to be about time where we go into the quick pitch here. I want to bring it back to Back to the Future, just for a brief moment to say that no matter what, no matter how much I love these movies, and no matter how many times I watch them, the mother will always be the girl from Beverly Hillbillies in my mind. The movie.
Oh, what?
Her role in the Beverly Hillbillies had like sunk into my brain so deep, it is just entrenched that it is like the base layer that Back to the Future sits on, instead of the complete opposite, which is the way it is for most people.
No, that's definitely like the opposite for me. 100% the opposite. I see her and I'm like, oh, the girl from Back to the Future.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody, exactly. That's why I have to at least bring it up that yes, I am just that big of a redneck that
the Beverly Hillbillies movie is what you base everything off of.
Not everything, just definitely her.
Just like most stuff.
Just like most stuff between that and Dukes of Hazzard.
She played Laura Jackson. I just looked it up.
Yeah, totally. And she was did the she impersonated the French girl that was supposed to straighten out Ellie Mae, you know.
Oh
Give her
yeah, yeah, I remember that. It's been a while since I've seen the Beverly Hillbillies movie.
So she was sitting in the bathtub singing "I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry,"
Yeah.
and attracted old Jim Varney.
Mm-hmm. Jed Clampett.
That's right. All right, we can move on now. I just had to throw that out.
Okay. Well, I guess, are you ready for quick pitch?
Let's do it. Mine's pretty simplistic, but I think it's potent.
Okay, go for it.
So when they make Back to the Future 4, which I hope they do, even though they've said it 1,000 times, they never will. Oh, say what?
Back to the Forture.
Back to the Forture. Yeah, that's horrible and definitely not going to be the title. But I like where you're going. So now that it is freaking 2019, which just blows my mind, I think that they go back to the 80s because I want to see, assuming that it's like as many people as possible can return to make the fourth that were on the original three. They were there in the 80s. They shot a movie about the 80s in the 80s. I want to see what their representation of the 80s would be in 2019. But not only that, I think as far as the plot goes, we could have something that maybe they left undone to where they go back like a day or two or maybe a week before the events of the first three movies. And that way, it's like this one thing that if not corrected will literally undo all of the work they've done in the past three movies, because now the destination date is like the 2 days before or something like that. And perhaps we can actually see maybe about how Doc and Marty got together, or maybe build out that relationship a little bit more like we were talking about earlier. But I think that holds a lot of weight. Like if they don't succeed, the rest of the three movies will all be untangled and undone. And that would also give them an opportunity to reference those movies very heavily like they've done in the past. Make sense?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I wasn't even coming at it from like that kind of point of view, but I actually like that a lot. I think that probably should be the direction that they go. Well, anyway, mine is I was trying to think of like the next logical step of where they should go. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier. Basically, they went to the past, and then so the next logical step was to go to the future. Now, there's not a lot of like logical steps to go after that, except what I think you just said. But my initial thought was, instead of having to go back to the past or back to the future, they do something that was kind of touched on in Back to the Future Part 2, but not really explored for the whole movie. And I think that now they've traversed their own timeline so much, I think they need to go to an alternate timeline. I think they need to go to an alternate universe, and it could kind of incorporate a lot of your ideas, like maybe Doc and Marty didn't meet, so this is how this has gone down, and this is how this has gone down. And so they kind of touch upon that in Back to the Future Part 2, where Biff gets in the time machine and he's able to take the sports almanac back to his younger self, and so that creates an alternate timeline. So we know that they are available and that they are something that have already been included in this continuity, but I would love for them to just go like universe hopping to kind of clean up. Now that they've messed up their timeline, it's thrown out of whack all these other universes, and so they need to go and kind of fix that and put linchpins in it to make sure that things happen the way that they're supposed to happen.
So they've found a way to like stabilize all the different branches and not just ruin their own branch. So now they're really getting Rick and Morty with it, and actually, yeah, I like where you're going with that.
It's not backwards or forwards; it's sideways.
I thought you were going to say to space, but you know,
no, no, I don't think they should go to space. I think we need to take our Vin Diesel campaign for Fast and Furious, hashtag keep Vin Diesel on Earth, and make it hashtag keep Doc and Marty on Earth.
I'm fine with that.
I think they need to stay, because as much as these movies are about time travel and like the crazy stuff, they are rooted in some kind of reality. You know, he's just a regular kid who happens to be back in time or in the future. And I think that's where a lot of the charm from it comes.
And now that we're like 30 years ahead of those events, maybe Doc has like invented a new time machine, like a more convenient way. Maybe it is something like something you hold in your hand, or, you know, something that's a bit more not quite a DeLorean, but because they're going on the specific mission to the 80s, you get that scene where it's like, oh, well, if we're going to the 80s, we got to blend in like old technology, and they rip the blanket off the DeLorean and it's covered in dust because it hasn't ran in years and years and years. And then it's like, that's right, we're breaking out the old time machine for this job.
Yeah, that would be a cool like third act thing where their time machines that they have in their hand are broken, and somebody's like, Biff's like, yeah, now you'll never catch me, and he zooms off somewhere else, and Marty's like, what are we gonna do, Doc? And Doc's like, well, we do have one option, and then just smash cut to whoosh, ripping the dust cover off of the DeLorean.
Yep, I love it.
Ba, 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 ba.
Enter John Williams.
Yeah. Well, I think that about wraps us up for this episode of the Scruffy Movies podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it. We have a lot of really cool stuff coming up in the upcoming weeks. Again, if you want to win the digital copies of Batman Ninja and Batman Gotham by Gaslight, all you have to do is enter the code word Batarang on the YouTube video below, or direct message me on Instagram at ScruffyMovies, and we'll get you entered in to win those 2 digital copies. Please follow us on Instagram at ScruffyMovies.
And Crockalicious.
Every time I think I'm going to laugh at it every time you say it for the entirety of this show. But we hope you guys enjoyed, and we will see you all next week.
Bye.